name's Pat Dennis. This is my second assignment. My audience will be my TAFE students who are studying within the Hospitality Qualification Framework. The event that I have chosen for this assignment is the newspaper report of Top Schools Linked to Racist Social page, as found in the Herald Sun. The Herald Sun reports that a racist Facebook group created by students from elite private school students in Melbourne has called for immigrants to get out of Australia. This event highlights the issue of intolerance, nationalism and racism within Australian society, and how this is both validated and perpetuated throughout popular cultural media sources. Facebook is an online networking site where users can collect friends, join organised groups and post comments and messages. Facebook has come under criticism for failing to adequately monitor itself to ensure that hate-based groups are not allowed to flourish. The Brisbane Times article, Groups Rile Against Hate Book, discussed the proliferation of racist and offensive groups within its site. A quick search of Facebook will discover sites vilifying Islam, Jews, Indigenous Australians, immigrants, asylum seekers and other minority groups not subscribing to the white male hegemony within Australia. Race Discrimination Commissioner Graham Innes is quoted in the Brisbane Times as saying that cyber racism was an issue that needed to be addressed. There is a need for free speech and open discussion on current political issues. Social networking sites and blogs are effective forums on up-to-date commentary, wide access to different opinions and freedom of speech within society. However, they cannot be used as a veil to hide racism and xenophobia, surreptitiously provoking intolerance and hatred within Australian society. The issue portrays racial difference as inferiority within society. This deficit is highlighted by the perceived inability to speak English to an acceptable level as determined by the group's creators. The issue of difference within Australian society is pathologised, the only cure being removal or eradication. The difference creates binary opposites who cannot be possibly Australian and therefore are not connected to this place. Hence the slogan, if you want to speak your crappy language, go back to where you came from. The Australian myth of nationalism dressed up as patriotism is spoken into existence through the actions of these school children, validating that attitudes formed within schools are a reflection of society. Far from accepting and understanding the pluralistic cultures within Australian society, the creation of this page perpetuates the myth of Australian society being white, imperialistic and based upon colonial English society, demanding assimilation into Australian cultural ways. This does nothing other than to cast Australia back 43 years and portray us as a backward and intolerant nation. It's true that the English language as the national language is an important unifying element of Australian society, but equally important is the recognition of a shared identity, a common bond which unites all Australians while respecting their diversity. This is the sentiment expressed in the Australian Values Statement. Individual, community and national identity cannot be determined by the homogenised cultural product of nationalism, misguided patriotism or through the paranoia created by the media of boat people and the illegal hordes sneaking into our country and stealing our jobs. This outbreak of paranoia in Australia, dividing us and them by race, does nothing but divide and oppress the community. To address this issue of individual identity, the curriculum must focus on the key points which I will now show you. The idea is to provoke thought into how we perceive ourselves and others, where this locates ourselves and others within the community and the nation. To question what gives us our identity. Is our identity unique, and is there a truly unique Australian identity? The discussion would focus on images of the Australian cultural icons of surfing, the Southern Cross, barbecues and cricket. We hold these all to be uniquely Australian, yet all are borrowed from other cultures. I would hope that this would open up my students to the concept that we are all individuals, yet we share more cultural similarities than differences. Here I wish to discuss community identity and the role of communities in national identity, to raise awareness that our rich heritage is the product of immigration and inclusion. Inclusivity is the key to acceptance and harmony. Excluding others from belonging harbours resentment and creates many of the problems we see today in society, such as the racial violence from both the oppressor and the oppressed. As my students are studying hospitality, I would use food as the focus of this discussion. Having a roundtable discussion, I would ask everyone to write down what is their favourite food. Put this onto a piece of paper and place it into a hat. Each student would then participate in a lucky dip. The food they have randomly selected would need to be researched for its cultural origins and also its place in contemporary Australian cuisine, and therefore culture. This would demonstrate how communities in Australia have enriched our national identity with their contributions. What is also important here is to discuss the role of globalisation, where we continue to see the erosion of our traditional cultural icons, which often metamorphosize into a cultural abstract of the original. These key points are proposed to address difference and diversity within the community. Continuing the focus on the difference of communities within our nation, it is my aim to look at other popular cultural media, such as commercial television, and how they portray Australian communities. I would choose a very mainstream program, such as Better Homes and Gardens, the Channel 7 Morning Show, or Home and Away. And I would ask my students, what do they see and what do they not see as being represented here from the Australian community? I would then turn the focus back to food. After all, they are studying hospitality and they are TAFE students. We would look at a segment of a show such as the Food Lover's Guide to Australia. The discussion generated from these topics will assist my students in understanding that different racial and ethnic groups are contributors to Australian society, enriching Australian culture with the addition of dialect, cuisine, religion and community, and that these contributions are to be celebrated, not ignored and excluded. I hope to expose difference as difference, challenging the notion of difference as deficit, which is portrayed in public pedagogies. I hope to promote understanding and acceptance of difference. I'm attempting to redefine my students' interpretations of difference as acceptable and interesting, not dangerous. I hope these insights my students have gained will influence their understanding and acceptance, reducing discrimination and marginalisation within the classroom and the community.